stop. If you are over 60 and you think your hair is thinning, give me the next few minutes before you touch a brush, a dryer, or a single product this morning. Because what I am about to show you might mean your hair was never thinning at all. It might simply mean you have been styling fine hair after 60 the wrong way for years and nobody ever told you. Look at this. Same woman, same hair, the exact same amount of hair on her head. But look at the difference between these two results. One styling method leaves the scalp exposed, flattens everything, and quietly adds 10 years to her face without her even realizing it. The other brings back instant volume and takes those same 10 years right off again. Same woman, same hair, completely different result. That is not a filter, that is not extensions, that is not some miracle product, that is technique. I have spent over 3 decades working with the hair of women over 60, and in all that time, the sentence I hear more than any other in my chair is some version of the same thing. I think I'm going bald. My hair used to be so full. What happened to it? I do not recognize my own reflection anymore. Today, I am going to walk you through the exact 5 mistakes that had one of my clients completely convinced she was losing her hair until the morning I showed her what was really going on. Here is what is actually happening, and I want you to really sit with this for a second. Your hair probably is not thinner than it should be for your age. It is being styled in a way that exposes the scalp, flattens the roots before you even leave the house, and hides the volume you still genuinely have underneath it all. I see these same 5 mistakes in almost every woman over 60 who sits in my chair, whether she is 62 or 78. Today, I am counting them down from number 5 to number 1, the mistake that actually decides whether any of the other 4 even work at all. Stay for that last one, because if you skip it, you could fix everything else perfectly and still be back here in a month wondering why nothing has changed. Welcome to Elorai Timeless Fashion. And before we get into number 5, this is a good moment to subscribe, because this is only the first video in a full series on fine and thinning hair after 60. If this helps you even a little, the next ones will help you even more, but only if you are still here to see them. Number 5. Stop parting your hair in the same spot every single day. This one seems so small that most people walk right past it, but it's a bigger culprit than almost anyone realizes. When you part your hair in exactly the same place, day after day, year after year, you are training that section of scalp to stay permanently exposed. Think of a path worn into grass by the same footsteps walked over and over. The hair on both sides of that part eventually learns to fall away from the line instead of toward it, and the gap widens a little more every year, whether you notice it happening or not. With fine hair, this becomes a visible strip of scalp that makes the thinning look far worse than it actually is. I want you to really hear that. Far worse than it actually is. Your part turns into what I call a canyon instead of a line. Wide, obvious, and impossible to hide no matter how you angle your head in the mirror. I have had women walk into my chair absolutely convinced they were experiencing serious hair loss, and when we actually examined the density across the whole scalp, the hair was there. It was simply being pushed away from one single line, carved by decades of the exact same part. The fix almost embarrassingly simple. Move your part slightly every few days. You do not need a dramatic change. Half an inch to one side is enough. This lets the hair lift naturally from the root instead of collapsing into that same worn path, and it adds volume exactly where you need it most, right at the crown, right where people actually look first. Number 4 is the one that hits your hairline in a way you're probably not expecting. So stay with me. Number 4, never brush your hair straight back away from your face. I see this constantly, and it quietly ages people far more than they realize while they are doing it. When you brush fine hair straight back, whether that is for a ponytail, a bun, or simply smoothing it before you leave the house, you are pulling it tight against the scalp and exposing the entire hairline in the process. Fine hair after 60 needs softness around the face. It needs gentleness, not tension, and a tight, straight back brush creates exactly the wrong kind. Every time you pull it back tightly, you place mechanical strain on follicles already weakened by age and hormonal change. And over time, that strain makes any hairline recession look considerably worse than it actually is. I have noticed this pattern again and again. Women who wore tight styles consistently for decades often show more visible thinning, specifically at the temples and along the front hairline, in exactly the pattern you would expect from years of tension, not necessarily from hair loss itself. Here is what to do instead. Brush the hair forward toward your face first, then gently guide it back into place using your fingers rather than a brush or a fine-tooth comb. Leave a few soft strands loose around the face instead of slicking every piece back. This single adjustment creates the illusion of significantly more volume and frames the face in a softer, considerably more youthful way, and it takes maybe 30 extra seconds in your morning routine. If you have been doing this one for years, you are far from alone. Most of my own clients have too, which is exactly why the next one tends to surprise people even more. Number 3, stop using a regular brush on wet hair. Wet hair is fragile hair, full stop, and fine hair after 60 is even more vulnerable in that state than you might think. When you take a regular brush to wet hair, you are stretching the hair fiber at the exact moment it is at its weakest structurally. Here is a number that might genuinely shock you. Wet hair can stretch up to 50% beyond its normal resting length before it actually snaps. 50%. That is not gentle styling. That is measurable damage happening in real time, strand by strand, every single time you brush right out of the shower. Over months and years, that repeated stress leads to breakage, split ends, and a gradual thinning of the visible strands that has nothing to do with your follicles and everything to do with how the hair is handled after it gets wet. The good news is this is one of the easiest fixes on the entire list. Use a wide tooth comb instead of a regular brush, and always start detangling from the ends, working your way up toward the roots as the knots release, never dragging from the top, straight down through a tangle. Better still, gently detangle with your fingers while conditioner is still in your hair in the shower, since the conditioner provides slip that reduces friction and breakage significantly. Make this one change, and within a couple of weeks, you will notice a real difference in how much hair ends up on your brush and in the drain. We are officially halfway through this countdown, and number 2 is the one almost nobody thinks to check. If this is landing for you, this is a great moment to hit subscribe here on Elorai Timeless Fashion so you do not miss the rest of this series. Number 2. Never dry your hair by pointing the nozzle straight downward. This one genuinely surprises almost everyone I have ever taught it to, including stylists who should probably already know better. When you point the airflow of your dryer downward while drying fine hair, you are physically forcing the hair to lie flat against the scalp as it dries. You are, in effect, flattening it in place with hot air, locking in exactly the opposite of what you want. Once fine hair dries flat like that, there is essentially zero chance of root volume surviving the rest of the day, no matter what product you applied beforehand. Here is what actually works. Tilt your head forward down to the floor and dry the roots first, directing the airflow upward and away from the scalp rather than down into it. If tilting your whole head is not comfortable, section the hair instead, lifting each section away from the scalp and drying underneath it with the nozzle angled up. The goal every time is to create lift and separation at the root before you worry about smoothing anything else. Once the roots are fully dry and standing up with some texture, then and only then should you focus on smoothing the ends. This one technique, simply changing the direction of your airflow, can genuinely make your hair look twice as full by the time you walk out the door, because you are finally working with your hair's natural growth pattern instead of fighting it. This next one is the mistake I promised at the start would decide whether everything else you just learned actually works or completely falls apart. I need your full attention for one more minute because this is the one that ties the whole thing together. Number 1, stop applying your products from root to tip. This is the defining mistake, the one that quietly sabotages every other fix on this list, even if you have perfectly mastered rules 5 through 2. Here is why. When you apply mousse, serum, oil, or even a leave-in conditioner, starting right at the roots and working down, you are adding weight exactly where you need the most lift and the least weight. Fine hair already has limited natural body to begin with, and any product sitting directly on the scalp makes the roots look greasy, weighed down, and flat within an hour or two, quietly erasing every improvement you just made with the part, the brushing, the wet hair handling, and the blow-dry technique. Here is the rule I want you to actually remember. Products go on the mid-lengths and ends only. Your roots should stay as clean, dry, and product-free as possible throughout the day. The only real exception is a dedicated root lifting spray or a volumizing powder, which is specifically formulated to be applied at the base without weighing anything down. Everything else, every smoothing serum, every shine spray, every leave-in treatment, needs to stay away from the scalp entirely. Do this consistently and your roots stay lifted and full of movement all day, while the ends stay smooth, controlled, and healthy looking. Now here is the part almost nobody actually explains properly, and once you understand it, everything else on this list will make a lot more sense. Your hair is not necessarily thinner just because you are losing more strands than you used to. Hormonal changes after menopause do reduce overall hair density for most women, and aging follicles do tend to produce noticeably thinner individual strands over time. But the real reason your hair looks so dramatically thinner now compared to 20 years ago is not primarily about how many strands you are losing. It is about the diameter of each individual strand shrinking. Picture 100 pieces of thick rope laid side by side compared to 100 pieces of thin sewing thread laid out the exact same way. Same number of pieces in both groups, but the rope takes up dramatically more visual space, more coverage, more presence. That is precisely what happens on your head as you get older. You may genuinely have close to the same number of individual strands you had 2 decades ago. Each one has simply gotten thinner in diameter, so collectively they cover noticeably less surface area than the count alone would suggest. That is exactly why every mistake on this list compounds the one before it, and why fixing just 1 or 2 of them often is not enough to see a real difference on its own. Here is the part that should genuinely give you hope instead of dread, and I say this to my clients almost every week. I have watched women sit down completely convinced they were going bald, defeated before we had even started, and in one single appointment show them they had plenty of hair all along. They were simply styling directly against it instead of working with it. This transformation does not require expensive treatments, supplements, or any medical procedure. It requires understanding how mature, fine hair actually behaves, and then working with that reality instead of against it every morning. I want to tell you about one client whose story is honestly a big part of why I still love this work. She came to see me completely devastated, having worn her hair pulled into a tight bun every single day for over 40 years, the exact same style since her 20s. Her hairline had visibly receded along the temples. Her part had gradually widened to nearly a full inch across, and her scalp was clearly visible from almost any angle, even under normal indoor lighting. She told me, before we had even touched her hair, that she genuinely believed there was nothing left to try, that this was simply what happened to hair at her age. We went through these exact 5 rules together, one at a time. We changed her rigid, unmoving part to a soft diagonal line. She gave up the tight, punishing bun for a low, loose style that did not pull on a single follicle. We swapped her flat paddle brush for a proper wide-tooth comb for wet detangling. She started drying her hair upside down at the roots specifically to build lift before ever touching the ends. And we moved every one of her smoothing products to the mid-lengths and ends only, leaving her roots completely clean. 2 weeks later, she sent me photos. Fuller, thicker, genuinely healthier looking hair on the exact same head, with the exact same amount of hair she had started with just 14 days earlier. Nothing had grown back in 2 weeks, of course. What had changed was entirely how it was being styled. She told me she had received more compliments on her hair in those 2 weeks than in the previous 10 years combined. And here is a thought I will leave you with, and feel free to push back on this in the comments if you disagree. I genuinely believe the entire hair loss industry over-medicalizes something that for a huge number of women is really a styling problem being mistaken for a medical one. Not always, of course. Sometimes it truly is medical, and that is worth a conversation with a doctor. But for so many women, the fix was never a product or a prescription. It was 5 habits, changed and repeated daily. Because I do need to be completely honest with you about one thing before you go. These rules only work if you stay consistent with them. You cannot change your part once and expect the volume to last forever. You cannot dry your hair upside down a single time and undo 40 years of the opposite habit. These are daily habits, not one-time fixes, and your hair has been trained a very specific way for years, sometimes for decades. Give the retraining process a little time and be genuinely patient with yourself while you build these new habits, because the results are absolutely worth the small adjustment period. If your hair already feels a little fuller just from hearing these 5 fixes explained, imagine what it will actually look like once you try them for real over the next few weeks. Come back and tell me how it goes. I mean that sincerely, and let me know in the comments which number surprised you the most. If this video helped you today, a like genuinely helps more women over 50 and 60 find their way to this channel. And if you have not subscribed to Elorai Timeless Fashion yet, this is your moment, because next week I am covering more on fine hair after 60, along with real transformations just like the one I shared with you today. This channel only gets better from here, week after week, and I genuinely do not want you to be the one who finds out too late. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I will see you in the next one. This has been Elorai Timeless Fashion.